Fanboy Friday with Mark Walters and Robert Miguel.
Coyote Country 104.9.
Time again for Fanboy Friday. With me on the phone, professional Q&A moderator and speaker, film critic at BigFanboy.com, and the show director at Dallas Comic Show. Man, I haven't talked to this guy since last year. Mr. Mark Walters. It's been so long.
It seems like an eternity, Rob.
It's been an eternity since last year. It's just my dad joke for you. So,
have you acclimated yourself to writing 2019 on everything yet?
You know, I've come to realize, I was just thinking about this today, actually, that I hardly ever write the date. I type it out all the time, but I don't have a checkbook. You know, I pay all my bills online. I don't really have a reason to write the date out, and I can honestly say that I have not even tried to write 2019 yet, so I haven't messed up. Isn't that crazy?
It's funny you say that, because I was just talking to a friend of mine the other day about the fact of, we were talking about writing and handwriting and things like that, and I said, you know what? I can't remember the last time I had to write something. Everything is automated now. Everything is over the phone or by computer. You know, everything is auto debit. You're right. It's like I don't even have checks, you know, because I don't really need them anymore. I think I keep some counter checks from the bank, but I don't actually have like a checkbook or anything. But yeah, I mean, it's funny how society has kind of forced us into the non-writing way of doing things.
We're just as bad as the millennials, man. Them and their no cursive writing butts. So,
you know what my problem with the no cursive thing is, though, and I don't know if you thought about if you don't teach somebody cursive, how are they ever going to have a signature?
Exactly. No. That's exactly what I feel, man. Because I prided myself on learning cursive because I wanted to have a style. You know what I mean? I think most of us guys, as kids, kind of really get into the way our dad signs a check or a paper. And I remember he had the sloppiest, coolest handwriting. And I remember when I got old enough to learn cursive, one of the cool things was I kind of wanted to mimic my dad's autographs, his signature. And, not knowing cursive, you know, people be writing, you know, block letters, and, you know, it's weird. It's like printing is not writing, you know? I don't know. It's a great point.
They need to bring cursive back. For the absolute minimum of allowing kids to develop a signature, because, I mean, otherwise, what are we going to have?
Right.
A bunch of kids growing up that are going to be signing stuff that looks like, you know, a caveman wrote it? I mean, if all you know how to do is print, then everybody's signature is going to look the same.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
I think it's a bad thing. Let's fix that in 2019. How about we fix that?
I tell you, let's get right on it. That is priority stat. All right, so let's talk about. Oh, hey, how was your New Year's? Pretty good, good stuff.
My New Year's was extremely uneventful. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't do anything. I was kept up late at night by all the gunfire, but no, I've been I was sick over the holiday, and so that sickness kind of carried over into the New Year. I was right at the tail end of it. So my New Year's was spent very cozy, very comfy on my couch. I take that back. I did watch the ball drop on Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve.
Oh, good.
And let me tell you something, Robert. If you ever want to feel old, watch Rockin' Eve and see if you can identify even half of the singers that they bring out in those songs. Because I don't know who any of those people are. I don't know what a Post Malone is or a Dua Lipa, but I am. I am officially old and out of touch.
I gave up on that show years ago, man. And you know, it's silly because it's still called Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve. Dick Clark's been away for how long, you know, now. But you know, I guess I respect them trying to keep a spirit alive, but it's not even what it used to be. So I feel you there.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the initial impetus of Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve? It's been so long, you know, since I remember when I first discovered it, I guess probably back in the 80s. But wasn't the original impetus of that show to bring in, like, new bands, like bands that you had never heard of before, and kind of give somebody, like, their big break to play on New Year's Rockin' Eve instead of it being, like, established superstar acts? Like, maybe they would bring in one or two of those to kind of finish it out, but it would be a lot of, like, new and unheard bands, kind of like the modern-day equivalent of, like, an Ed Sullivan show. And but it seems like it's really kind of moved away from that, and now it's just current popular acts, and that's it. Like, there's no up-and-coming bands, there's no local bands. I think the closest that they got was, because it takes place in, like, 3 different, that's the other thing, it's talk about confusing. It takes place in 3 different places. It's L.A., New Orleans, and New York City.
Right.
So, like, they cut to New York, they show you someone playing. They cut to L.A., they show someone else playing. They cut to New Orleans, they show someone else playing. And the New Orleans segment did have a really cool, like, Creole band that I had never heard of, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I'll have to look those guys up. But yeah, it just seems like that show really should be about discovering talent, especially when you're going into the new year, as opposed to just bringing back Christina Aguilera or New Kids on the Block or whatever to sing a song. To me, that seems kind of counterproductive. But what do I know? I'm the old man screaming at the cloud now.
Well, you know what? First of all, I think half of that show is pre-recorded, like days or weeks before. Second of all, I think you're right. What I believe is that New Year's Rockin' Eve was a spinoff from his American Bandstand. So that was kind of like where he showcased new artists. And I don't think that he necessarily. I mean, Post Malone is relatively new as an example. So I don't think that's necessarily out of. But as far as like bringing back retro artists, yeah, I think it was always kind of like a highlight of the last year or so. And then maybe looking forward. So I think you got some truth to what you're thinking there.
By the way, I'm not that out of touch. I know who Post Malone is. I just think it's funny to say, what is a Post Malone?
What is a Post Malone? Right, exactly. It's like what? Like what's cursive? All right, man. Well, there's some good movies coming out in theaters this week. Well, not a whole lot going on. Really, the big one is Escape Room, which to me looks kind of like one of those Saw kind of type movies. What you got? I know you saw that one, right?
I did. Yeah, I saw it literally because there was nothing else screening, and I hadn't been out to a movie in weeks, and so I was kind of looking for an excuse to get out of the house. And so, yeah, we had a screening of that this week. And that is a very solid comparison to compare it to something like Saw. However, I would say that this one is, I guess you could say it's a little more timely because, for those of you listening, the concept of an escape room, I'm sure you guys have heard about this. It's extremely popular right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, businesses are taking their entire office to go participate in these escape rooms. They're really kind of growing in popularity, almost as like, what do you call it, group building exercises or whatever. But it's become like a real fad, that everybody's kind of participating in and everybody likes. So the movie kind of takes that concept and turns it into, of course, a horror movie. And now if you've seen movies like Saw, or if you've seen those types of films, or if you're like me and you're real into sci-fi and like direct-to-video underground fare, there was a series of movies called Cube, which actually did the same concept back in the 90s and kind of into the 2000s. And so basically the concept is, you put these complete strangers together in a room. They have to figure out a way to get out of that room, and maybe one of them doesn't survive each room. And so we've seen that play out in films before. It's certainly nothing terribly new. This movie is probably the first movie to use it as a concept of people being invited to participate, that they willingly go to participate, and then they find themselves trapped in this room and whatnot. At least it's the first one that I can think of that kind of plays out that way. And I think that that's partly because of the fact that escape rooms are popular and are a fad. It's reasonable to think that if someone got an invitation like this in the mail, that they would say, oh, yeah, I want to do that. And it's also worthy of note that within the story, the concept is that if they participate, if they win, that they win $10,000. So there is a cash prize in the line. So they have motivation to want to do it. Probably the only poorly written aspect of that, or the only aspect that doesn't quite work, is one of the guys that's participating in it is supposed to be like this very wealthy business executive. So it kind of begs the question of, well, why would he do it? Why would he feel the need to participate if it's just $10,000? I mean, I'm sure this guy probably makes $10,000 in a week. But yeah, you get these 6 strangers that are brought together, and they all kind of have a dark past. They all have something that's taken place in their past, which over the course of the movie, you get little clues about that, and eventually you do see in flashback what exactly happened to them that kind of led to them being there. And so it is kind of an interesting. The movie in itself is kind of like a puzzle. Like you're trying to solve the puzzle while you're watching it. And they get really, really creative with the rooms that they use. It almost kind of evokes Like if you saw Cabin in the Woods, there's kind of a little bit of that in this movie, just a hint of that type of thing in terms of maybe the rooms being something that is computer enhanced or projection enhanced, to where they could walk into a room and it looks like they're out in the middle of a complete mountainy ice field or something, but they're actually still inside a room. But yeah, it's very clever in how they play it out. Now, my only real gripe, if I had to complain about anything, because I actually thought the movie was pretty intense and pretty effective for what it was, very entertaining. It definitely holds your attention and it kind of keeps you guessing. I mean, like, as these guys are trying to figure out what to do in the room, you're kind of trying to do the same thing. Like, you're looking around, you're trying to look for clues and whatnot. So I really kind of appreciated that aspect of it. It is very engaging in that way. But they decided, for whatever reason, to make this PG-13, I guess, to try to appeal to, as many people as possible. So it never really goes into the horror territory that it probably could. I think that this is obviously being sold as a horror movie, but to me, in my mind, a real horror movie isn't going to be scared to show blood and gore and things that, you would expect to see in a horror movie. And so this film never really quite goes that extra mile that you feel like it could. I almost wonder if maybe the home video version, if there might be some alternate takes or something that they could have explored that with. But still, very creative in terms of how it's presented. And then my only other gripe for the film, which I think a lot of people might have issue with, the people at our screening seem to kind of take issue with it, was the ending of the film, without giving anything away. The ending kind of goes out of its way to explain a lot of stuff and sort of show you the behind the scenes of a lot of stuff. And I really felt like, they could have saved that for the sequel. Like, obviously, these movies are made with the sequel in mind.
Right.
That's stuff that they could have saved and revealed later. And instead, it felt like they were really pushed to, I don't know, maybe they were afraid the audience was going to say, we didn't feel like they explained it enough. And so they kind of go out of their way to explain, like, who was behind this and why they're doing it and all that. And I just feel like that's something that really could have been left to, a future film. Now, that said, I will say that the film itself is very entertaining, and I also want to point out, just in case anybody's worried about it, like, because it is a horror movie, like the death scenes and the intensity of the movie, it does not suffer. Like, they actually do a really good job of keeping the movie tense, and, like, if somebody dies in the movie, it carries an impact. So, I mean, the characters are really well established, and they did a great job of kind of keeping it sort of that classic horror movie. You're worried about these guys, and if somebody dies, it does carry some weight. It doesn't feel like a throwaway moment. So I appreciated that. So maybe this is kind of a sign of, like, the horror movie kind of finding its legs and coming back again. I think we've seen a lot of we kind of fell into this age of, I don't want to blame the Insidious movies, because, I mean, some of those are pretty scary, but we sort of fell into this age of the Insidious archetype kind of, like, taking over the horror genre, to where it seemed like every movie was just trying to be Insidious. And so this is kind of a return to more of the classic, horror tropes that you and I kind of grew up with and really, enjoyed. And it works. It really works well. So I enjoyed it quite a bit. I just want to make that clear. I think it's a fun movie. I enjoyed it a lot. I just wish the ending would have been a little more ambiguous, because I think that when you make a horror film, I think the best horror movies are the ones that kind of keep you guessing and keep you curious, to where you do want a sequel. You do want to come back for more. So hopefully people won't be too bothered by it. I was a little put off by it, but maybe somebody else would say, oh, it was exactly what I wanted.
Well, right on. Again, that's Escape Room, rated PG-13. It looks like that's PG-13 for some suggestive material, language, terror, perilous action, and violence, coming in at an hour and 40 minutes, out in theaters this weekend. You said earlier, before we got on the air, that you saw that new Nicole Kidman movie. Is that right?
Yeah, Destroyer. It opened. It actually opened last week in New York and L.A., but I think it's expanding wide this weekend.
Okay.
Not this weekend, definitely next weekend. But yeah, it's an interesting film. It's very talked about movie. Played some of the film festival circuits earlier last year. the reason that a lot of people are talking about it is because Nicole Kidman in the movie is almost unrecognizable. They have really uglied her up, and made her look very hardened and very, like she's lived a really rough life. She plays a disgruntled cop, and the movie kind of, over the course of the film, as you watch it, through a series of flashbacks, you find out kind of what led to where she is now and why she is so kind of tortured mentally and why she's kind of let herself go. She's also dealing with problems with her own daughter. And basically the whole thing kind of revolves around a case that went bad, an undercover investigation that went bad. So it's an interesting film, very dark. It's directed by Karen Kusama, who directed Girl Fight and also Jennifer's Body. But it's a very, very dark film. There's like no humor at all in this movie.
Huh.
And
Wow.
If you're a fan of Nicole Kidman, this is Nicole Kidman like you've never ever seen her before. And I realize that sounds like a tagline, that it actually is the tagline they're using to promote this movie, but it's so true because when you see her in this movie, you almost won't even believe it's her. It's such a transformative performance for her to try this. We used to joke about this sometimes, about how you'd see certain movies and you'd see like some actress like Monica Bellucci that was supposed to be playing like a peasant woman, and it's like, you could throw all the dirt you want on that woman, she's not going to look ugly. And
Right.
in this movie, Nicole Kidman, I'm telling you, there's a couple of shots of the film where I was watching it and I was just like, I almost forgot that I was watching Nicole Kidman because it just looks so different
Wow.
and so unusual to her normal appearance. So, and also I will say they did a really good job because in the film there's a lot of flashbacks where you see her when she was younger and she was kind of getting mixed up in this undercover investigation. And I'm guessing they must have done some digital work or something, or maybe it was just makeup. But when they make her look younger, she really does look younger. Like, it kind of reminded me of, like, Nicole Kidman when she was doing that movie Dead Calm or something. I mean,
Wow.
they did a really, really good job of making her look exactly like she was supposed to in the film. Now, the film itself is not what I would call a really great movie. In fact, I don't even know if it's all that terribly satisfying, even as a cop story. But it is very intense, and I think it's absolutely worth a look, especially if you're a fan of hers. But that's going to open. It already opened in New York and LA, and I believe it goes wide this weekend. If not this weekend, definitely next weekend. So check your local listings and look for Destroyer.
All right, once again, that's Destroyer, starring Nicole Kidman, rated R for language throughout, violence, some sexual content, and brief drug use. 123 minutes, so it's a little over 2 hours. So, all right, man. Well, anything else you want to talk about with BigFanboy.com? Any cool stuff going on the website?
No, it's been a really slow time for news. Not
Yeah.
a lot of trailers, not a lot of stuff hitting. I'm imagining that's going to start ramping up here pretty soon. We got a lot of big movies this year. Marvel's got some big stuff coming out. We've got Captain Marvel. We've got Infinity War Part 2, or I'm sorry, Avengers Endgame. I keep wanting to call it Infinity War Part 2 because that's basically what it is.
Right.
And then, from the DC camp, you've got Shazam. Wonder Woman 1984 got pushed back, so we're going to have to wait until 2020 for that now.
Wow.
So, yeah, we'll have a lot to talk about. I think it's going to start ramping up here pretty quick. So,
Well, everybody go check out the website, BigFanboy.com, for the latest reviews and whatever trailers Mark has up there and some good photos and all kinds of good stuff. So, once again, thank you, Mark. Let's give it up to professional Q&A moderator and speaker, film critic at BigFanboy.com, and show director at Dallas Comic Show, the one and only Mark Walters. Yeah.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Fanboy Friday with Mark Walters and Robert Miguel.
Coyote Country 104.9.